pleased and thrilled to be joined by the voice of the Mississippi State Bulldogs. That is Neil Price. Neil, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Hey, Eric, Brent, good to see you. I clearly misunderstood the assignment. I went back and I looked at some of these, what I thought I was doing, and you guys had coats and shirts on. So had I known that it was casual Sunday, I wouldn't have dressed up as much.
I started to say, Neil, you have clearly classed up this operation that we're doing on this Sunday night, my man.
Well, I kept looking at this thing, and there were four of you behind the desk with a coat and a shirt on, and I said, well, I guess I better look the part. And then, I logged in, and I'm like, oh, well,
we're going to blame this on Austin. He reached out to you to set this up. I'm sure he told you the Rocky Top Roundtable. This is the Rocky Top Rewind, so that's on AP, all right?
Well, we need to blame him for something, right, Neil?
I can lose the jacket if it makes everybody feel better.
Hey, I want to ask you, speaking of dressing it up and putting on a show, this Mississippi State team to me is pretty fascinating, Neil. I mean, you're 2-10 a year ago. You're 0 in SEC now. Some people say, well, I mean, Arizona State's a good win, but the others, whatever. But this feels totally different than it felt in year one with Jeff Lebby. Why?
I just think the culture's different in a good way. It's a second year of Jeff and his staff being able to kind of continue to lay that foundation. They like the energy they had in the building throughout last year. They just didn't have the horses, I think, or enough of them to go out and be competitive in a league like the SEC. This year, I think they've got more people that are capable of helping them reach some of those goals. I still think they're a long way from where they'd ultimately like to be, but they've got people who have a year or two in the system. In Brennan Thompson's case, it's year 3 because he was with Jeff at Oklahoma and got to know him there a little bit. And, you've got your quarterback back. You didn't have Blake Shapen more than 3.5 games a year ago. So, and more people on defense. They were really thin on the defensive front last year. That showed up when you look at the lack of pressures, lack of sacks, all those things. They knew the people that they wanted to go get in the portal, identified those guys quickly, and got a good many of them. And I think when you add all that together, it's been a pretty good recipe for them a month into the season.
Neil, is this a team that's better offensively, or is this more about what they have built through the portal and creating an identity defensively?
I think the defense probably shows up more in the numbers when you're talking about improvement. They're clearly better 4 games into the season in 2025 from where they were in 2024. Offensively, I think the improvement, again, goes back to having a lot of guys who are year 2 in Jeff Lebby's system. And he's talked a lot about his relationship with Blake Shapen and how, Blake used the time when he was injured last year in those last 7 games of the season and then whatever in December and on into getting ready for spring ball. He really got in the video room, really got into the playbook, started to dig deep into the terminology, and now he understands situationally what Jeff Lebby wants him to do, and those guys are speaking the same language, is what Jeff says to me in terms of how he's trying to describe their relationship. So I think that's where the offensive improvement shows up. He's always been a guy who wanted to run the ball, use that to set up some deep shots, and then, make your plays through the air. But now I think he's got people who understand when the right times are to do that. And, hopefully it's something they can continue against a really tough SEC schedule.
Yeah, Neil, you mentioned running the football, and Mississippi State so far in the early going, averaging over 200 yards on the ground. And, Davin Booth was a guy that I remember last year in this game, a young guy at the time and was a pretty good player. He's got some help now. What has Mississippi State done to address, running the football, and how effective has this been early on?
Well, the running back room is the best room on the team when you're talking about the quality of depth, the talent, all of that comes together in that room. So you had Devon Booth coming back, who got the year because everybody gets an extra year now, and everybody was happy to have him. We all joked he was probably one of the biggest recruits they got during the offseason. They got to bring him back. But you had Johnny Daniels coming back too. Johnny's not played as much this year, and they probably didn't want him to have to play as much a year ago. But when you don't have that many bodies, you have to play guys a lot of snaps. So he got a lot of valuable experience, but because that room has gotten deeper this year with Bluff Bothwell coming in from South Alabama, He's been very good in the first 4 games of the year. Xavier Gayton is a guy who got some snaps last year, but clearly was the third guy in that room. Now I think he has solidified himself as a guy who's going to be in that every game rotation moving forward. Seth Davis missed all last year. They got him back, another speed guy from Texas that they really like, scored his first touchdown in 2 years, a couple games back after having to sit where his knee basically got obliterated in a game against Ole Miss at the end of the year. So they've got depth there. They've got talent. And they've just got to get an offensive line group to stay healthy long enough to keep in front of those guys that they can open up blocks and understand what Phil Lodeholt wants them to do. It's been 4 games with 4 different offensive line groups so far. Knock on wood, everybody seems to be healthy now, but if the same group trots out there on Saturday afternoon, it'll be the first time this year that the same offensive line group started in back-to-back games, and that's a huge part of your run game.
Well, that says a lot about what your running backs have been able to do in your run game to average. I mean, you got over, 800 yards rushing, I think, 835 yards rushing, something like that in 4 games with 4 different offensive line. Says a lot about what you're getting done. I know, some of that's competition at times, Neil, but to win in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, to open the season, I thought that was an important game to kind of set the deal. And then obviously beating Arizona State had to be a big shot in the arm. How much mileage do you think that there is to gain out of winning that game early to kind of set the tone for this stretch that you get ready to get into?
Well, I don't know how it'll impact the remainder of the year because the schedule is what it is. But what I know the coaching staff hopes to get out of it is mileage and recruiting. They had every major target that they had their eyes on in the building that night, and it kind of felt like a scenario going into it where they knew they had to win the game to make the right impression and hopefully continue to build upon the foundation that they've laid here. I think when you play against a team that's got a number by its name and you have success, sure, it can help you. And when you get into this league, you're going to do that every week. I mean, there aren't many teams in this league that aren't ranked or aren't receiving votes. So I think there is some confidence there. But I think, too, when you're talking about the SEC, and due respect to Arizona State, that's a really good football team. But we're not talking about apples and oranges here. I mean, we're talking about apples and oranges here. The 16 teams in this league compared to what you see in the Big 12, compared to what you're seeing in the ACC week in and week out, I don't think that it's the same thing. So I think that you've got to find another level beyond that if you're going to have success in the back half of the year.
Neil, you brought up the defense a moment ago. Last year, if my note is correct, only 5 sacks in Southeastern Conference play, 10 sacks on the year. Already 5 sacks here in the early going. Is that an area where it's been improved? Too early to know? What's Mississippi State look like getting after the passer?
Well, they went out and they got a boatload of defensive ends, rush ends. That was something they identified and knew they needed to have coming out of last year. So I think part of it is there's more depth. If you look at the numbers on a lot of those guys they brought in, they were really impressive. Now, they may not have all been at a P4 school. Some of them may have been at Group of 5, but still guys who understood how to create pressure. Will Whitson was the kind of the crown, the jewel in the crown, I guess, so to speak, in that group. And they lost him for the year in that game against Arizona State. So now it's who's going to step up, because, again, there are plenty of guys there who have proven that they can do it. It's just a matter of who is going to. And I think it's still a little bit of a work in progress with regard to that. Their interior defensive linemen are playing a lot better, especially against the run. They've got some linebackers, including Jalen Smith, that they're really excited about. Jalen's played well in the first 4 games of the year. So I think, when you're talking about front 7, front 6, depending on how they line up, I think they're happy, but I still think there's progress and there's still some improvement to be made going forward.
Neil, I'm curious, kind of big picture a little bit. Jeff Lebby knew this league. He's been a part of Power 4. He's been a part of championships. What do you think Jeff Lebby learned last year as a head coach that he has used to help him have this program in a better spot in year two? What do you think he learned as a first-time head coach? I mean, listen, going 2-10 and 0 in league play is not what anybody signed up for. What do you think he learned from that?
That you can't have enough talented players. I think that's exactly what he learned. And, he inherited, if we're being perfectly honest, he inherited a mess.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because I tell people the story here all the time. I'll get the question, what's it take for Mississippi State to be successful in football? And I said, the thing you need to root for is continuity. I've been here since 2017. Jeff Lebby's the fifth football coach I've worked with. Now, there are some extreme circumstances in that have contributed to why there have been 5 coaches here in that stretch. But the thing I think he learned is he stepped into a program that didn't have the depth or overall talent level to be competitive in the toughest conference in the country. And that will bring 2-10 and over into play quickly. So I think that was the priority. Those guys all huddled up in the building at the end of last season and throughout the season and said, look, we got to find more people, especially on that defensive team, that can be physical, that can make plays, and where we can have some depth. And again, I think they've done a good job of moving the ball forward in all of those areas. But 1 year isn't enough to be able to put it together. You got, as coaches say, you got stacked days, you got stacked years in recruiting. You got to keep bringing guys in. You got to keep growing numbers. And I think that's the next priority. Can you have enough success to get guys to believe that, yeah, you can come here and win. You can be a winner here. You can get wherever you want to go. And then bring in more of them so you can keep building that roster to get it where it ultimately needs to be.
Yeah, certainly, Neil. Mississippi State looks a whole lot more improved so far this year than last year, so that's good to see, obviously, for State fans. Last question I have for you, Neil. Obviously, Jeff Lebby worked with Josh Heupel for a couple of years. I don't watch every Mississippi State football game. I know you don't watch every Tennessee game, but similar offense. They don't do the exact same thing, but similar terminology, similar schematics. How much did Lebby take from Heupel with his time with Heupel and kind of implement himself and throw some of his own twists and turns and all that on his offense? But it's still a similar offense, but it's not the exact same, correct?
I don't think it's the exact same, but I think there are several pieces of these two offenses that mirror one another. I can't speak to what the terminology is like from one program to the other. What I can tell you from talking to Jeff about it over the last year plus now, especially going into that game last year in Knoxville, he has a lot of respect for Josh Heupel and thinks highly of him, not just as a football coach, but as a person. And I think those guys worked their tail off to get Central Florida to a place where it did what it did when the two of them were there and established itself out of that group of 5 as a team that nobody really wanted to mess with. And now both of them have gone on to kind of carve their own path with regard to what they're trying to do in this league. But I think their time together probably is beneficial for the both of them. If you'd ask them in an honest moment, just because they're two guys who both played on offense, both played at a time in their college program where there was a lot of success. And I think they took lessons from there. And then also took lessons from, am I wrong in saying Josh comes from a coaching family too? Am I right? I know, Jeff's dad was a coach. So you've got that to lean on too. And I just think all those things together, those two guys being around one another, it couldn't do anything but help both of them. And I think it's rubbed off in a good way.
All right, Neil, my last question before we let you go put on your comfy clothes for the night. I'm curious about – I know Mississippi State fans probably wanted this to be a night game. State probably administratively wanted this to be a night game. Where's the fan base in terms of building the excitement? I thought the environment for Arizona State was awesome when I saw that on TV. Where's the excitement level for this? How big of a hornet's nest Tennessee walking into?
Well, they had less than 1,500 tickets left today, so I think there's going to be a big crowd for it. I think you're right. People love having night games. They love being able to get to campus and kind of enjoy the tailgating and do all the things that come along with that. Here, it's different than any other place I've been because if you're a State fan, you've got to commit some resources and some time to come to a game because, you probably live an hour and a half away on average from Starkville. So you got people coming from Jackson. You got people coming from Memphis in some cases, some from Huntsville, Alabama. You got some who are trying to fly in here from Houston and Dallas that are in the engineering business out there. So to have 4 home games in a row, it's not realistic, unfortunately, to sit there and think you're going to sell that place out every game because people just physically can't do it. So I think that there was a huge crowd for Arizona State. There was a good crowd for Alcorn State because you had 2 in-state teams playing one another. Way down last week, and then it'll go back up because you've got SEC opener. You've got a state team that's won 4 in a row. Tennessee's coming in 3-1, 2 teams playing really well. So I think people are going to be really excited about it. It'll be the biggest conference game here in a long time. I'd say going back to, Coach Leach's last year coaching here probably. So, I think they'll put on a good show, and we hope both the teams do the same, and that we've all got something exciting to watch and talk about come Saturday.
Well, Neil, I look forward to seeing you this weekend. I certainly appreciate your time tonight. Thanks for the insight on kind of where Jeff Lebby's got this program going into year 2. Should be a fun matchup. A lot of similarities, which makes for an interesting chess match between 2 coaches. My friend, it's great to see you. Thank you. I'll see you at the ball yard.
All right, guys. See you.